The morning mist rises from the Gloucestershire valleys on a September day in 1976, revealing a Georgian manor house that seems almost deliberately unremarkable. No golden gates announce its presence, no ceremonial guard stands watch. Yet behind the weathered Cotswold stone walls of Gatcombe Park lies one of Britain's most intriguing royal residences, a 730-acre estate that cost Queen Elizabeth II $750,000, equivalent to $5.8 million today, as a wedding gift for her only daughter. Unlike the gilded palaces that define royal imagery, this mansion tells a different story, one of calculated modesty, agricultural enterprise, and a princess who chose mud-splattered boots over glass slippers. With its 20 principal rooms and working farm, Gatcombe Park stands as a deliberate rejection of royal ostentation. Yet its walls hold secrets of Georgian merchants, Victorian economists, and a modern princess who turned a fading country house into England's premier equestrian venue. How did a house built for an 18th-century cloth merchant become the perfect refuge for a princess who drives her own horse box? And what does this unassuming estate reveal about the careful balance between public duty and private enterprise that defines the modern monarchy? Chapter 1. The Princess and the Proposition. The year 1976 marked a turning point for the British monarchy's relationship with property. As drought-parched England's lawns to brown and punk rock erupted from London's underground clubs, Queen Elizabeth II stood in the drawing room of a Gloucestershire manor house, calculating. Not the cost. Though at £750,000, Gatcombe Park represented a significant investment even for the Crown. But the statement. Her daughter Anne, recently married to Captain Mark Phillips, needed a home that would satisfy multiple, often contradictory requirements: private enough for a young family, suitable for a princess, practical for an Olympic equestrian, and distant enough from London to discourage casual scrutiny. The estate agent's particulars described a substantial Georgian country house with excellent equestrian facilities. But what the Queen saw went deeper. Here was a property with no royal history, no courtly associations, no ghosts of previous princes. The house, solid and unspectacular, had been built in the 1770s by Edward Shepherd, a man who made his fortune not through noble birth, but through cloth, specifically the superfine broadcloth that earned Gloucestershire its reputation across Europe. Shepherd had chosen his site carefully. Close enough to the wool markets of Stroud and Dursley, elevated enough to survey his holdings, yet tucked into the landscape with a merchant's instinct for discretion rather than display. The bones of the house spoke of prosperity without pretension. The central block, 5 bays wide and 3 stories high, displayed the mathematical precision of Georgian architecture, windows decreasing in height as they ascended, a pediment crowning the composition like a considered afterthought rather than a grand statement. The Bath stone facade, weathered to the color of winter butter, bore none of the Portland stone brilliance of London's palaces. This was architecture in the Gloucestershire vernacular, speaking the local dialect of limestone and rain. Inside, the Queen's practiced eye catalogued details that estate agents might overlook. The staircase, while elegant, occupied minimal space, a merchant's priority of function over ceremony. The principal rooms, though well-proportioned, numbered just 20, excluding service areas. No ballroom, no throne room, no state apartments. The morning room faced east to catch first light, practical for a household that rose early. The library, paneled in oak rather than exotic woods, suggested serious use rather than decorative bibliography. But it was the land that sealed the proposition. 730 acres spread across the Cotswold edge, mixing arable fields with permanent pasture, punctuated by copses of beech and oak. The previous owner, Samuel Courtauld, heir to the textile fortune but more interested in art than agriculture, had maintained the estate without developing it. The stables, though requiring renovation, possessed the solid construction of the pre-automotive age when horses meant transport, not sport. The paddocks, fenced in post and rail, needed only minor repairs to meet competition standards. Financial negotiations proceeded with characteristic royal discretion. The asking price of $750,000 would be met without haggling. The monarchy never haggles, but conditions attached. The purchase would be private, from the Queen's personal funds rather than state resources. No public money would fund this acquisition, avoiding the parliamentary scrutiny that dogged royal expenses. The Duchy of Lancaster's income, derived from a portfolio accumulated over 7 centuries, would provide the capital. This distinction mattered. Gatcombe would be personal property, not crown estate, inheritable by Anne and her descendants outside the usual royal succession. The seller, Lord Butler of Saffron Walden, former Conservative Minister R.A. Butler, understood the delicate choreography of transferring property to royalty. No publicity attended the viewing visits. Documents were signed in lawyers' offices rather than at the property. The completion date, July 1976, passed without fanfare. Only when removal vans arrived bearing the modest household goods of the princess and her husband did locals realize their new neighbor's identity. Yet even as Princess Anne took possession of her perfectly ordinary country house, signs emerged that Gatcombe Park would become something unprecedented in royal residential history. Within weeks, horse trials courses appeared in the South Paddock. The princess herself could be spotted not waving from a balcony, but walking fence lines, testing ground conditions, discussing drainage with contractors. The stable block renovation prioritized function over aesthetics, automatic water systems, proper ventilation, surfaces chosen for safety rather than appearance. This was to be no Windsor Castle in miniature, no Sandringham of the South. Instead, Gatcombe Park would evolve into something the monarchy had never previously attempted. A working commercial enterprise run by a member of the royal family, generating income through ticket sales and television rights rather than consuming public funds. The Georgian merchant who first built these walls might have approved of such fiscal prudence. But first, the house needed to reveal its own history, layer by layer, owner by owner, each adding their own chapter to a story that began 2 centuries before any princess crossed its threshold. Chapter 2. The Merchant's Dream. Edward Shepherd arrived in Gloucestershire in 1768 with money in his pocket and ambition in his heart. The cloth trade had made him wealthy, not aristocratic wealth that flowed from ancestral lands, but new money earned through understanding profit margins and wool quality. The distinction mattered in Georgian society, where breeding counted more than bank balances, yet Shepherd possessed something the old families increasingly lacked: ready capital in an age when even dukes struggled with liquidity. He chose his building site with a merchant's calculation. The land, part of the dissolved Minchinhampton Abbey estates, had passed through various hands since Henry VIII's Reformation, never quite settling into greatness. The location offered everything a practical man required: proximity to the Stroudwater navigation for transport, elevation above the malarial valley mists, southern exposure for warmth, and enough distance from established gentry seats to avoid invidious comparisons. Shepherd paid $8,000 for the core estate, roughly $1.2 million in modern currency, a sum that bought respectability without ostentation. The architect Shepherd chose remains uncertain, though the design bears hallmarks of the Bath school that flourished under John Wood the Younger. No innovative flourishes marked the plans. Instead, the house displayed the mathematical certainty that defined Georgian architecture: a central block with balanced wings, proportions derived from Palladian ratios, ornament restricted to classical motifs that any educated man would recognize. The builder's accounts, preserved in the Gloucestershire archives, reveal pragmatic choices. Local Cotswold stone rather than imported Portland, oak from estate timber rather than mahogany from the Indies, slate from Wales rather than lead from Derbyshire. Construction began in spring 1771, timed to allow foundations to settle before winter frosts. The workforce drew from local villages, masons from Painswick, carpenters from Nailsworth, plasterers from Cirencester. Shepherd paid standard rates, 3 shillings daily for skilled men, 18 pence for labourers. Neither generous nor miserly. The accounts show no stoppages for disputed wages, suggesting fair treatment by the standards of the age. Women appear in the records too, earning 8 pence daily for carrying water and mixing mortar, their names recorded only as Thomas's wife or Widow Brown. The house rose steadily through 1772 and 1773. Shepherd supervised personally, his diary noting visits every Tuesday and Friday to inspect progress. His concern for detail extended beyond aesthetics to function. The kitchen occupied the north wing, connected to the main house by a covered passage that prevented food from cooling while keeping cooking odors from reception rooms. The servants' quarters, reached by separate stairs, allowed discreet movement of staff, visible when needed, invisible when not. Revolutionary for its time, the house incorporated water closets rather than chamber pots, fed by lead pipes from a hilltop reservoir. By Christmas 1774, the family took residence. Shepherd's wife Elizabeth, daughter of a Bristol merchant, brought her own fortune and connections. Their household assembled the careful balance of Georgian domestic life: a butler from London to provide metropolitan polish, a cook trained in Bath to manage provincial ingredients with sophistication, local girls as housemaids who might learn skills for their own future households. The wage bill totaled $200 annually, modest for a house this size, suggesting efficiency rather than excess. The estate developed alongside the house. Shepherd applied commercial principles to agriculture, experimenting with crop rotation when many landowners still practiced medieval three-field systems. He planted turnips to feed cattle through winter, maintaining milk production year-round. His account books record investments in improved sheep breeds, recognizing that wool quality mattered more than quantity in the evolving textile market. The home farm supplied the house while surplus went to market, generating income rather than merely supporting consumption. Social acceptance came gradually. The established families, the Duttons of Sherborne, the Kingscotes of Kingscote, maintained polite distance initially. But Shepherd's wealth spoke louder than his birth. He subscribed to local charities, funded a village school, maintained roads at his own expense. His daughters, educated in accomplishments if not Latin, married into minor gentry. His sons attended Oxford, emerging as gentlemen whatever their grandfather's origins. The house reflected this trajectory toward respectability. The library filled with leather-bound volumes, some read, others for display. The drawing room walls carried portraits by competent, if not celebrated artists, establishing visual genealogy where actual ancestry fell short. The dining room table seated 16, allowing entertainment on a scale that demonstrated prosperity without challenging established social hierarchies. Shepherd understood his position. Wealthy enough to be courted, not powerful enough to threaten. Yet beneath this careful respectability lay innovation. Shepherd installed early industrial heating, using a Bolton and Watt steam apparatus to warm greenhouses where he grew pineapples, ultimate symbols of disposable wealth. He experimented with gas lighting in the stables years before. London streets knew such illumination. The estate workshops employed machinery for threshing and milling, increasing productivity while reducing labor costs. This was landed life conducted on commercial principles, profit and loss calculated as carefully as any cloth transaction. When Edward Shepherd died in 1798, his estate passed intact to his eldest son, the house now fully accepted into Gloucestershire society. The obituary in the Gloucester Journal praised his improvement of agriculture and benevolent disposition toward the laboring poor. No mention of trade sullied these respectable sentiments. Gatcombe Park had achieved its creator's goal, transforming merchant money into landed status, new wealth into old respectability, commerce into countryside. But the next chapter of its story would bring intellectual rather than commercial distinction to these Cotswold acres. Chapter 3. The Economist's Laboratory. David Ricardo arrived at Gatcombe Park in 1814, carrying notebooks filled with economic calculations that would reshape how the world understood wealth. Already famous for his Principles of Political Economy and Taxation, Ricardo purchased the estate for $90,000, an enormous sum reflecting both wartime inflation and his own spectacular success in government securities. Unlike Edward Shepherd, who sought respectability through land, Ricardo viewed Gatcombe as a practical experiment in his revolutionary theories about rent, wages, and agricultural productivity. The transition from merchant to intellectual proprietor transformed the estate's character. Where Shepherd had carefully accumulated the trappings of gentility, Ricardo stripped away pretension to focus on efficiency. The ornamental gardens gave way to productive plots. The deer park became pasture for improved sheep breeds. The home farm expanded from picturesque appendage to serious agricultural enterprise. Ricardo approached land ownership like a mathematical problem. Given X acres receiving Y rainfall with Z soil quality, what cultivation method would yield maximum return? His improvements began with drainage, not the picturesque lakes favored by landscape designers, but practical field drains that converted marginal land to production. He employed John Ferry, the agricultural surveyor, to map every field's soil composition. The resulting charts, preserved in the estate papers, resemble geological surveys more than traditional estate maps. Each field received designation, suitable for wheat, barley, turnips, or permanent pasture. Crop rotations followed scientific principles rather than local tradition. The workforce expanded under Ricardo's ownership, but with crucial differences from traditional estate employment. He paid above-market wages, 4 shillings daily for skilled agricultural workers when the local rate was 3 shillings. This wasn't charity, but calculation. Higher wages, Ricardo argued, attracted better workers who produced more, ultimately reducing per-unit costs. He built cottages for workers, not the picturesque hovels common on aristocratic estates, but practical dwellings with proper windows, wooden floors rather than earth, and gardens where families could grow vegetables. The main house reflected its owner's intellectual rather than social priorities. The former morning room became Ricardo's study, filled not with sporting prints, but with charts tracking commodity prices, wage rates, and agricultural yields. He installed a printing press in the stable block, producing pamphlets on economic subjects for distribution to fellow political economists. The library expanded to hold not just decorative bindings, but working texts. Adam Smith annotated in margins, Malthus disputed in penciled notes, parliamentary reports dissected for statistical evidence. Ricardo's household operated on principles shocking to conventional society. He employed a Jewish cook, acknowledging his own Sephardic heritage that polite society preferred to ignore. His children's tutors included a German mineralogist and a Swiss mathematician, expertise valued over social credentials. The butler, retained from the previous owner, recorded in his memoir the peculiarity of serving dinner where conversation ranged from corn prices to constitutional reform, rather than hunting and gossip. Visitors to Gatcombe during Ricardo's residency included figures who shaped 19th-century thought. Thomas Malthus stayed for weeks, walking the fields while debating whether agricultural improvement could outpace population growth. James Mill brought his young son, John Stuart, who would later credit these visits with shaping his understanding of political economy. Maria Edgeworth, the novelist and social reformer, described animated dinner discussions where Mr. Ricardo explains the most abstract theories with the clarity of a schoolmaster and the passion of a prophet. The estate became a testing ground for Ricardo's most controversial theories. His law of rent, that landowners captured surplus value created by population growth and agricultural improvement, played out in Gatcombe's fields. As he improved productivity through drainage and scientific cultivation, land values rose, proving his point that landowners benefited from others' enterprise. The irony wasn't lost on Ricardo, who now profited from the very system his theories critiqued. Yet Ricardo attempted to reconcile theory with practice through unprecedented arrangements. He established a profit-sharing system where agricultural workers received bonuses based on yield increases. The estate carpenter earned commission on improvements that reduced maintenance costs. The head gardener received percentage of profits from surplus produce sold at market. These experiments in incentive alignment prefigured later industrial practices by decades. The 1819 parliamentary election brought Ricardo's economic theories into political reality. Purchasing the pocket borough of Porterlington in Ireland, he never visited it, Ricardo entered Parliament as a radical reformer. From Gatcombe, he drafted speeches advocating free trade, parliamentary reform, and Catholic emancipation. The estate office became a political headquarters where reform-minded politicians gathered to coordinate strategy. The contrast with neighboring estates, where squires defended agricultural protection and traditional privilege, couldn't have been starker. Ricardo's death in 1823, at just 51, ended Gatcombe's role as an economic laboratory. His widow Priscilla maintained the estate, but not the experiments. The profit-sharing arrangements lapsed. The reformed wage structure reverted to local norms. The drainage projects, half completed, slowly failed for lack of maintenance. Within a generation, physical traces of Ricardo's innovations vanished, leaving only his published theories to influence distant readers. Yet examination of estate records reveals Ricardo's lasting impact on those who worked his land. The children of his agricultural workers appear in disproportionate numbers among the next generation's schoolteachers, clerks, and skilled artisans, education funded by wages saved during the Ricardo years. The cottages he built, solid and practical, survived when picturesque hovels collapsed. The field drainage systems, when finally completed by later owners using his original plans, transformed marginal land into productive acres. The intellectual legacy proved even more enduring. Ricardo's theories, developed while walking Gatcombe's fields, influenced Marx's critique of capitalism, Mill's liberalism, and eventually Keynes's economic revolution. The estate that began as a merchant's bid for respectability had become a crucible where modern economic thought took shape. But after Ricardo's death, Gatcombe would return to more conventional ownership, its radical chapter closing as Victorian propriety reasserted itself across the Gloucestershire countryside. The house awaited its next transformation, one that would come not through revolution, but through royal resolution. Chapter 4: Victorian Propriety and Hidden Decline. The Gatcombe Park that David Ricardo's son inherited in 1823 bore little resemblance to the intellectual powerhouse his father had created. David Ricardo Jr., more interested in hunting than economic theory, systematically dismantled his father's innovations while maintaining a facade of Victorian respectability that masked steady decline. The estate records from 1823 to 1890 tell a story repeated across England. Agricultural depression, technological disruption, and the slow erosion of landed wealth disguised by increasingly desperate attempts to maintain appearances. The younger Ricardo's first act was to restore the ornamental gardens his father had converted to productive use. He hired William Andrews Nesfield, fashionable designer of parterres and fountains, to create elaborate geometric patterns in box hedging filled with seasonal bedding plants. The cost, $3,000 initially, plus $400 annually for maintenance, exceeded the entire agricultural profit of the estate. Where his father had grown vegetables for workers' consumption, the son planted exotic specimens that required heated greenhouses and specialized gardeners. The household expanded to Victorian proportions while income contracted. The 1851 census recorded 32 indoor servants at Gatcombe: butler, under-butler, footmen, valets, ladies' maids, housemaids, kitchen maids, scullery maids, laundry maids, still-room maids. Each position required specific uniforms, separate working spaces, and rigid hierarchies that created inefficiency in the name of propriety. The annual wage bill reached $1,300, not including the additional costs of feeding, housing, and clothing this elaborate human machinery. Below stairs, the reality of service revealed itself in preserved correspondence. Mary Ann Wheeler, third housemaid from 1854 to 1857, wrote to her sister describing 18-hour workdays beginning at 5 a.m., with grate cleaning and ending near midnight after the family retired. Her annual wage of $12 barely covered the required uniform deductions. The butler, Mr. Stevens, earned $80 annually, but faced instant dismissal for any breach of elaborate etiquette. He was released in 1862 for serving claret at the wrong temperature. The agricultural depression that began in the 1870s struck Gatcombe particularly hard. American wheat imports, arriving via improved Atlantic shipping, destroyed British grain prices. The estate's wheat fields, expensively drained and improved by David Ricardo Sr., now lost money with every harvest. Attempts to convert to dairy farming failed when refrigerated ships brought cheap meat and butter from Australia and Argentina. By 1880, agricultural rents had fallen 40%, while the costs of maintaining Victorian standards continued rising. Financial records from this period, discovered during 1990s restoration work, reveal the desperate measures taken to maintain appearances. Valuable paintings were quietly sold to London dealers, replaced with copies that fooled dinner guests but not creditors. The family silver went piece by piece to pawnbrokers, with Sheffield plate substitutes filling the gaps. The wine cellar, once stocked with distinguished vintages, held increasingly inferior bottles decanted into prestigious bottles for special occasions. The house itself began showing distress. The revolutionary water closets installed by Edward Shepherd, now a century old, failed regularly, flooding upper floors and damaging plaster ceilings below. The Bolton and Watt heating system, never properly maintained after Ricardo Sr.'s death, ceased functioning entirely in 1876. Bedrooms grew so cold that ice formed inside windows. The family confined themselves to a few heated rooms, while maintaining the fiction that the entire house remained in use. Samuel Courtaulds' purchase of Gatcombe in 1893 for $60,000, significantly less than Ricardo had paid 80 years earlier, represented salvation and transformation. Courtauld, whose family fortune came from manufacturing the very textiles that Shepherd had once traded, brought industrial wealth to rescue agricultural decline. Yet his approach differed radically from previous owners. An aesthetic and intellectual, friend to Virginia Woolf and Roger Fry, Courtauld saw Gatcombe not as agricultural enterprise or social statement, but as backdrop for civilized living. The restoration Courtauld undertook revealed the house's accumulated problems. Dry rot had invaded the timbers, requiring wholesale replacement of floor joists. The revolutionary lead water pipes, now poisoning rather than serving residents, needed complete replacement with modern copper. Electric lighting, installed throughout in 1895, required cutting channels through historic plasterwork. Central heating, properly engineered this time, meant excavating basement spaces for boilers and radiator pipes. Courtauld's workers, documented in detailed payrolls, represented the changing nature of country house labor. Traditional craftsmen worked alongside industrial specialists. The estate carpenter, William Morris, no relation to the designer, earned $2 weekly, good wages for rural Gloucestershire. But the electrical engineer from London commanded $5 weekly plus expenses, reflecting new technical hierarchies. Women workers, previously confined to domestic service, appeared in restoration crews as plasterers' assistants and painters, earning 2 shillings daily. Still less than men, but more than domestic service offered. The social landscape around Gatcombe transformed during these Victorian decades. The railway reached Stroud in 1845, connecting the isolated Cotswolds to London in 4 hours. Villages that had remained unchanged since medieval times suddenly sprouted red brick villas for Birmingham manufacturers seeking country retreats. The old social certainties, land meant wealth, birth determined status, crumbled as surely as Gatcombe's original plasterwork. By 1900, Gatcombe Park stood restored but fundamentally altered. The house that merchant money built and economic theory animated had become a comfortable anachronism, its agricultural purpose abandoned for aesthetic appreciation. The armies of servants dwindled to a manageable dozen. The elaborate gardens simplified to lawns and specimen trees. The estate farms, leased to tenants, provided modest income rather than social status. This Victorian chapter closed with the Gloucestershire volume of Nicholas Pevsner's Buildings of England, 1968, dismissing Gatcombe as a decent Georgian house of no special distinction. Yet beneath its conventional surface lay layers of innovation, aspiration, decline, and renewal that epitomized the English country house experience. These hidden histories would remain largely unknown until a princess arrived, bringing not just royal status, but something rarer, the determination to make an old house earn its keep in a modern world. Chapter 5. The Burden of Service. The bells of Gatcombe Park began ringing at 5:30 each morning, not to wake the family. They slept until 8. But to summon the invisible army whose labor made Georgian and Victorian country house life possible. From the 1770s through the 1940s, between 30 and 50 individuals worked to maintain the fiction that comfort appeared effortlessly, meals materialized spontaneously, and houses cleaned themselves through some natural process like morning dew evaporating from grass. The servants' quarters, accessed through a concealed door beside the main staircase, revealed a parallel universe within Gatcombe's walls. Narrow corridors, uncarpeted to muffle no footsteps, connected cramped chambers where 2 or 3 servants shared beds in spaces half the size of family dressing rooms. No fires warmed these rooms. Coal cost money, and servants were expected to generate their own heat through constant motion. Windows, placed high to prevent servants from looking out or being seen, provided minimal light and less ventilation. Elizabeth Hartley, employed as head housemaid from 1887 to 1912, left a remarkable diary discovered in 1998 during attic renovations. Her daily routine, recorded in pencil on cheap paper, began with emptying and cleaning 23 chamber pots. The Courtauld family and guests generated approximately 40 pounds of human waste daily before modern plumbing's complete installation. This task, performed before breakfast, required carrying heavy slop buckets down back stairs to outdoor cesspits, regardless of weather. February 12, 1891. Ice in the pots again. Took an hour to empty all. Mrs. C complained about noise on the stairs. The hierarchy below stairs proved as rigid as any above. The butler ruled supreme, eating separately, addressed as Mr. Stevens, while calling underlings by surnames only. The cook, Mrs. Davies, despite being unmarried, cooks were always Mrs. for respect, controlled kitchen territories with iron authority. Between them, they managed a complex gradation. Ladies' maids outranked housemaids who outranked kitchen maids who outranked scullery maids. Each level had specific privileges. Upper servants got tea with sugar, lower servants got tea without, lowest servants got water flavored with used tea leaves. Wages tell their own story of inequality. In 1850, the butler earned $60 annually while the scullery maid received $8. But even these figures mislead. From wages, servants paid for uniforms, 2 sets required, costing $5. Breakages, a dropped plate, cost a week's wages, and medical care, no sick pay existed. The estate papers record Sarah Mills, parlor maid, having $3 deducted for a china figurine knocked over while dusting, 6 weeks' wages for 5 seconds clumsiness. Many servants ended the year owing money to their employers. The kitchen complex occupied the entire north wing's ground floor: main kitchen, pastry kitchen, scullery, pantry, still room, meat larder, game larder, dairy, and bakehouse. The main kitchen's great range, installed in 1832, consumed a ton of coal weekly, maintaining temperatures that reached 100 degrees Fahrenheit in summer. Annie Morgan, kitchen maid from 1898 to 1901, was hospitalized for heat exhaustion 3 times. The estate records note her dismissal for persistent weakness, with no pension after 3 years' service. Laundry work proved equally brutal. Monday washing for a household of 20 generated 400 pounds of wet fabric. The laundry maids, always young women, as the work destroyed hands within years, began at 4 a.m., heating copper vats over coal fires. Lye soap, made from ash and animal fat, burned through skin. Mangles for pressing required 2 women to turn massive handles, processing hundreds of sheets, tablecloths, and garments. The 1881 census recorded 3 laundry maids at Gatcombe. By 1891, all 3 had left service, 2 with documented rheumatism, 1 with lungs affected by steam. The outdoor servants faced different challenges. The head gardener managed 6 under-gardeners who maintained 50 acres of formal gardens, kitchen gardens, and glasshouses. Their work schedule followed daylight, 4 a.m. to 9 p.m. in summer, with no overtime pay. William Briggs, under-gardener from 1876 to 1889, recorded growing 3,000 bedding plants annually, each raised from seed, transplanted multiple times, and placed in precise geometric patterns that lasted mere weeks before replacement. The futility wasn't lost on him. "We labor all year for flowers the family barely notices." The stable staff, coachmen, grooms, and boys, lived above the horses they tended. Horses required feeding at 5 a.m., 11 a.m., and 6 p.m., plus grooming, exercise, and constant observation for illness. A sick horse meant potential dismissal for the groom responsible. When Ricardo Jr.'s favorite hunter died of colic in 1867, the head groom was dismissed without reference after 15 years' service, effectively ending his career. Gender determined not just work, but life possibilities. Female servants were dismissed instantly if pregnant, regardless of circumstances. The estate records document Martha Wells, housemaid, released in 1883 after being found in a delicate condition. No record exists of consequences for the footman responsible. Male servants could marry with permission. Female servants could not marry and remain in service. This created a permanent underclass of women who aged out of service with no family, savings, or pension. The 1911 National Insurance Act began changing this dynamic, requiring employers to contribute to servants' insurance. The courtolds, relatively progressive employers, paid the required contributions, but many servants couldn't afford their own portions. The estate papers show careful calculations, reducing staff numbers rather than increasing wages to cover insurance costs. Technology aided this reduction. Vacuum cleaners replaced housemaids, gas lighting eliminated lamp trimmers, motor cars displaced grooms. World War I delivered the fatal blow to Gatcombe's servant culture. The 1914 staff roster listed 43 individuals. By 1919, only 12 remained. Young men who survived the trenches refused to return to service. Young women who'd earned good wages in munitions factories wouldn't accept domestic servitude. The elaborate machinery of country house life, built on cheap labor and rigid hierarchy, collapsed within a generation. Yet these servants left few monuments to their labors. No portraits hang in Gatcombe's galleries showing the faces that polished its floors for decades. No plaques commemorate the laundry maids whose burned hands smoothed its linens. Their stories survive only in fragments, census entries, wage books, occasional diaries hidden in attics. They built and maintained the gracious life that country houses represented, receiving in return wages that barely sustained life and certainly permitted no gracious living of their own. This invisible foundation of privilege would crumble completely by the time Princess Anne arrived, requiring entirely new models of maintaining historic houses without armies of servants. Chapter 6. Royal Transformation. The arrival of Princess Anne at Gatcombe Park in September 1976 marked not restoration, but revolution. Unlike previous owners who sought to recreate past glories or maintain inherited traditions, the Princess Royal approached her new estate with the unsentimental eye of a competitive horsewoman assessing a prospect's potential. The house needed work. Serious, expensive, unglamorous work that would never feature in architectural magazines but might transform a declining country estate into a viable modern enterprise. The initial survey, conducted by royal architects from the Crown Estate, revealed problems invisible to casual viewing but catastrophic for long-term preservation. The roof leaked in 17 places, admitting water that had rotted floor joists throughout the attic level. Rising damp, that peculiarly British affliction, had invaded the ground floor, carrying salts that crystallized behind painted surfaces, causing whole sections of plaster to detach from walls. The electrical system, installed piecemeal between 1895 and 1950, violated every modern safety code. The heating system consumed $15,000 annually in oil while failing to warm rooms above 55 degrees Fahrenheit in winter. But Princess Anne saw past these deficiencies to possibilities. Where others might envision restored Georgian elegance, she planned functional efficiency. The vast Victorian kitchens became equipment stores for horse trials. The butler's pantry transformed into an office managing equestrian events. The flower room converted to a boot room where muddy riders could clean up without tracking dirt through the main house. This wasn't destruction of heritage, but adaptation for survival. The renovation began in October 1976 with unglamorous infrastructure. New drains, properly engineered, replaced Victorian pipes that discharged sewage into streams feeding the River Frome. The work required excavating the entire east lawn, revealing archaeological layers of previous attempts at modernization. Georgian brick drains, Victorian clay pipes, Edwardian patches, each generation's solution becoming the next generation's problem. The cost, $180,000, exceeded the original purchase price of most country houses, but remained invisible once lawns were restored. Central heating presented particular challenges. The princess rejected proposals for radiators that would damage historic interiors. Instead, engineers installed an underground ground-source heat pump system, among Britain's first residential installations. Pipes buried 3 feet deep circulated fluid that absorbed Earth's constant temperature, providing heating in winter and cooling in summer. The system cost $250,000, but reduced heating bills by 70% while eliminating the oil tank farm that had disfigured the North Garden. The roof restoration revealed hidden histories. Beneath multiple layers of repairs, workers discovered original 1770s timbers bearing carpenter's marks, Roman numerals indicating assembly order. Several beams showed evidence of reuse from earlier structures, possibly the medieval buildings that preceded Gatcombe. One timber, subjected to dendrochronological analysis, dated to 1485, the year of Bosworth Field. Princess Anne insisted these historic elements be preserved wherever structurally sound, adding steel reinforcement rather than replacement. Staffing the renovated house required completely different approaches from historic service models. Instead of live-in servants, the princess employed local workers who arrived at 8 a.m. and departed at 5 p.m. The housekeeper, Mrs. Patricia Kelly, managed a team of 6 who cleaned on rotation rather than maintaining constant presence. The cook prepared meals in advance for freezing rather than producing elaborate daily spreads. The only live-in staff were a security officer and a groom for the horses, protection and animal welfare being the only functions requiring 24-hour presence. This pragmatic approach extended to the estate's agricultural operations. Rather than maintaining farms as picturesque appendages, Princess Anne established commercial enterprises. The arable land, leased to local farmers on profit-sharing agreements, generated $40,000 annually. The parkland, carefully managed for conservation while supporting rare breed cattle, qualified for environmental grants worth $25,000 yearly, but the transformation of Gatcombe into Britain's premier private equestrian venue proved most revolutionary. The Festival of British Eventing, launched in 1983, turned Gatcombe's parkland into a commercial sporting venue for one weekend annually. The princess personally designed the cross-country course, using natural features: the lake created by Humphrey Repton in 1808, the hollow way marking a medieval road, the veteran oaks planted by Edward Shepherd as obstacles testing horses and riders. Temporary grandstands accommodated 30,000 spectators. Television rights, sold to BBC Sport, generated 6-figure sums. Corporate hospitality tents, discreetly positioned to avoid sightlines from the house, provided additional revenue. The economics were transformative. The 1983 event generated $150,000 in gross revenue against $50,000 in costs, producing profit that exceeded the estate's entire agricultural income. By 1990, the event generated $500,000 annually. This money funded ongoing restoration without touching royal finances. Gatcombe became the only royal residence that paid its own way through commercial activity, rather than public subsidy or inherited wealth. Local employment impacts proved significant. Event weekends employed 200 temporary workers, parking attendants, ticket collectors, vendor staff, security guards. Local businesses, hotels, restaurants, pubs, reported revenue increases of 300% during event weekends. The Gatcombe Park events contributed an estimated $2 million annually to the local economy by 1995. The princess insisted on using local suppliers wherever possible, from portable toilets to gourmet catering, keeping economic benefits within Gloucestershire. Yet this commercial success created tensions. Traditional neighbors objected to traffic, noise, and the commercialization of countryside. planning applications for temporary structures faced objections from residents who preferred invisible decline to visible enterprise. The princess attended parish council meetings personally, arguing that active use preserved heritage better than genteel decay. Her presence, direct, unsentimental, informed, usually prevailed over romantic objections. The house itself evolved to support this dual existence. Reception rooms that might host royal guests on Tuesday became event control centers on Saturday. The library stored not just books, but event plans, risk assessments, and insurance documents. The morning room's Georgian desk held computers managing online ticket sales. This integration of historic architecture with modern technology required careful balance. Wireless routers hidden behind paneling, security cameras disguised as architectural ornaments, modern additions reversible to preserve historic integrity. By 2000, Gatcombe Park had achieved what no other British country house managed: complete financial self-sufficiency through commercial activity, while maintaining private residential use and historic preservation standards. The model proved that historic houses could survive without becoming museums, wedding venues, or corporate conference centers. They could remain homes while generating income, preserve heritage while embracing change, honor history while securing futures. Chapter 7. The Machine Behind the Magic. Behind Gatcombe Park's public success as an equestrian venue lies an intricate operational machinery that would astonish Edward Shepherd and perplex David Ricardo. Modern Gatcombe functions through systems as complex as any Victorian household, but based on contracts rather than servitude, technology rather than manual labor, and careful scheduling rather than constant presence. The transformation from aristocratic residence to commercial venue requires choreography as precise as any royal ceremony, but focused on profit margins rather than protocol. The annual cycle begins each January when Princess Anne personally walks the cross-country course, noting where winter storms have damaged fences, where drainage has failed, where rabbits have undermined obstacles. Her notebook, filled with sketches and measurements, becomes the blueprint for restoration work beginning in March. Local contractors, many working at Gatcombe for decades, repair jumps using traditional techniques: mortise and tenon joints rather than metal brackets, locally sourced oak rather than pressure-treated pine, designs that appear permanent but dismantle quickly after events. The technology infrastructure, invisible to visitors, rivals any modern office complex. Fiber optic cables, buried alongside heating pipes during the 1998 renovation, provide broadband connectivity throughout the estate. The event control room, concealed in the former dairy, contains systems managing everything from ticket sales to emergency response. During events, 40 closed-circuit cameras monitor crowds, coordinating with police and medical services. The princess can observe everything from her study, intervening only when necessary, but always informed. Water management proves particularly complex. A single event weekend sees 30,000 visitors consuming approximately 150,000 liters of water, while generating 200,000 liters of waste. Temporary infrastructure includes 40 water bowsers stationed strategically, each requiring filling every 4 hours. The sewage system, designed for a family house, cannot handle event volumes. Instead, 200 portable toilets, serviced continuously throughout events, manage human waste. The logistics require military precision, hence why Princess Anne employs former Army logistics officers as event coordinators. The insurance arrangements reveal modern risk management replacing aristocratic assumption of liability. Public liability coverage of $50 million protects against spectator injuries. Additional policies cover everything from horse accidents to food poisoning, weather cancellation to terrorism. Annual premiums exceed $100,000, requiring careful calculation of ticket prices to maintain profitability. The princess personally reviews every risk assessment, understanding that one serious accident could end Gatcombe's commercial viability. Catering operations transformed the stable block into temporary kitchens serving 10,000 meals daily during events. 5 separate contractors operate different venues: corporate hospitality serving 3-course meals, members' tent offering buffet lunches, public food stalls providing quick service, bars managing alcohol sales, and specialist vendors accommodating dietary restrictions. Food safety inspections occur throughout events, with environmental health officers having authority to close any operation immediately. The princess learned this personally when she ate from each vendor, publicly demonstrating confidence in food safety standards. The economic model depends on multiple revenue streams. Ticket sales, $30.60 per person, generate $600,000. Corporate hospitality, $500 per person, adds $300,000. Television rights bring $200,000. Trade stands pay $50,000 collectively. Parking charges contribute $30,000. Against this, costs mount relentlessly. Temporary structures, $150,000. Security, $80,000. Medical services, $40,000. Traffic management, $30,000. Cleaning, $25,000. Insurance, $25,000. Marketing, $20,000. And numerous smaller expenses. Net profit averages $200,000. Respectable but requiring constant vigilance against cost inflation. Ecological impact, increasingly important to public perception and planning permission, requires careful management. Events generate approximately 50 tons of waste. Gatcombe pioneered recycling at outdoor events, separating waste into 6 categories, with 70% diverted from landfill. The carbon footprint, calculated since 2005, equals that of a small village for 1 year. Offset programs, including tree planting on estate land and renewable energy investment, aim for carbon neutrality by 2030. The year-round maintenance schedule operates with minimal staff. 4 permanent groundsmen maintain the estate, their work varying seasonally, preparing courses in spring, managing events in summer, clearing up in autumn, conducting repairs in winter. They earn $25,000 to $30,000 annually, middle-income wages for specialized skills. During events, temporary staff numbers swell to 200, most earning minimum wage but grateful for weekend work in rural areas with limited employment opportunities. Princess Anne's personal involvement extends beyond ownership to active management. She chairs monthly planning meetings, reviewing everything from ticket pricing to portable toilet placement. Her knowledge encompasses legal requirements. She passed the crowding safety qualification, animal welfare, she holds veterinary training certificates, and business management. She completed accounting courses. This hands-on approach ensures nothing remains delegated without oversight. The relationship with local authorities requires constant cultivation. Planning permission for temporary structures needs annual renewal. Traffic management plans face scrutiny from highways departments, environmental health monitors, food safety, police coordinate security, fire services inspect emergency access. Building these relationships through year-round engagement rather than crisis management enables smooth event operation. The princess attends local government meetings, not as royalty expecting deference, but as a business owner seeking cooperation. Technology continues evolving Gatcombe's operations. Online ticket sales, introduced in 2001, now account for 80% of revenue. Social media marketing, managed by a part-time coordinator working remotely, reaches audiences traditional advertising never touched. Drone footage provides course inspection capabilities and stunning marketing imagery. GPS tracking on cross-country courses enhances safety while providing television graphics. Each innovation requires investment balanced against return, decisions Princess Anne makes personally rather than delegating to committees. The success metrics extend beyond financial returns. Gatcombe employs 30 people full-time across various roles, supporting families in an area where rural employment continues declining. The events attract 100,000 visitors annually to Gloucestershire, benefiting countless local businesses. The conservation programs, funded by event profits, protect 730 acres of traditional countryside against development pressure. The equestrian facilities, available for training outside event periods, develop future Olympic competitors. This operational complexity remains invisible to visitors who see only smooth-running events in beautiful settings. Like the servants who once maintained country house illusions through hidden labor, modern Gatcombe depends on concealed infrastructure and careful planning. The difference lies in recognition and remuneration. Today's workers are acknowledged professionals earning fair wages rather than invisible servants surviving on minimal pay. Chapter 8. Hidden Histories Revealed. The restoration work at Gatcombe Park has repeatedly uncovered physical evidence that challenges official narratives, revealing stories deliberately suppressed or accidentally forgotten. Each discovery, from servants' graffiti to buried foundations, adds layers to understanding how power, privilege, and persecution intersected within these walls. Princess Anne's unusual decision to commission archaeological investigation rather than simply repair and conceal has transformed Gatcombe into an inadvertent archive of social history. The most significant discovery occurred in 2003 during routine drainage work. Excavators uncovered a substantial stone foundation predating the Georgian mansion, oriented differently from the current house. Archaeological investigation revealed remains of a medieval manor house, likely built around 1340 and demolished when Edward Shepherd constructed his Georgian statement. Carbon dating of charred timbers suggested violent destruction by fire around 1470, possibly during the Wars of the Roses, when Gloucestershire saw repeated military action. Pottery fragments and personal items, a pewter badge, iron keys, a child's leather shoe, humanize this forgotten catastrophe. Within the current house's walls, renovation revealed penciled inscriptions left by Georgian building workers. Behind plaster in the former servants' quarters, carefully preserved graffiti includes John Taylor Mason, 1771, God Save Us from Hunger, and Timothy Smith, 4 shillings owed by Master Shepherd. One poignant inscription, discovered in the attic, reads, Mary Hobbs, aged 14 years, 1772. Mother died of fever, father unknown, God help me. These fragments provide rare testimony from usually voiceless contributors to country house construction. The estate archives, properly catalogued only in 1999, contained explosive revelations about Edward Shepherd's wealth. While official family history credited success in cloth trading, detailed accounts reveal significant income from investments in slave trading voyages. Shepherd held shares in 3 Bristol ships trafficking enslaved Africans to Jamaica between 1756 and 1772. The profits, carefully recorded as colonial ventures, funded approximately 1/3 of Gatcombe's construction cost. This connection between enslaved labor and English country houses, long suspected but rarely documented, proves explicit in Gatcombe's accounts. David Ricardo's papers, donated to Cambridge University but incompletely catalogued, included materials returned to Gatcombe in 2007. Among them, correspondence reveals Ricardo employed formerly enslaved individuals at Gatcombe after slavery's abolition in British colonies in 1833. William Freeman, identified in wage books simply as Gardener, was actually William Olaudah Freeman, liberated from a Jamaican plantation and brought to England by Ricardo as an experiment in free labor. Freeman's own letters, discovered in an outbuilding, describe the peculiar experience of earning wages in England while family remained enslaved in Jamaica. The Victorian period's hidden histories emerged through analysis of estate health records. Between 1840 and 1880, 14 female servants at Gatcombe were dismissed for illness that careful reading reveals as pregnancy. Cross-referencing with parish records identifies fathers in several cases, usually male servants or tradesmen, occasionally family members. 3 women died in the Stroud workhouse within 2 years of dismissal. Their names, Sarah Mills, Elizabeth Harper, Martha Wells, appear nowhere in official house histories, but their tragedies shaped lives as surely as the celebrated owners. Princess Anne's decision to investigate rather than conceal extended to commissioning oral histories from elderly local residents. Margaret Thompson, aged 93 in 2001, remembered her mother's stories of working as a laundry-maid at Gatcombe in 1905. The account described not genteel service, but industrial-scale labor. Mother's hands bled daily from the lye soap. She showed me the scars 40 years later. These testimonies, recorded and archived, preserve experiences that written records ignored. Archaeological investigation of the grounds revealed evidence of a Romano-British settlement beneath the South Lawn. Coins dating from 250–400 CE, pottery fragments, and building foundations suggest continuous occupation for over 1,700 years. The spring that still feeds Gatcombe's lake appears to have been sacred. Votive offerings including bronze brooches and deliberately broken weapons were discovered. This continuity of place, sacred spring becoming medieval manor, becoming Georgian mansion, becoming royal residence, provides perspective on temporary human ownership of permanent landscapes. The estate's role during World War II emerged through declassified documents in 2010. Gatcombe housed evacuated London children from 1940 to 1945, its owners having relocated to smaller accommodation. The house sheltered 40 children from Bermondsey, most experiencing countryside for the first time. Their memories, collected through newspaper appeals, describe wonder at space and nature, but also hunger, wartime rations barely adequate for growing children, and homesickness for London's familiar streets despite bombing dangers. Recent restoration of the stable block revealed African spiritual symbols carved into beam undersides, invisible unless lying on the floor looking upward. Identified as Akan protective symbols from modern Ghana, they suggest enslaved or formerly enslaved individuals worked at Gatcombe, probably during Ricardo's ownership. These symbols, maintaining African spiritual practices despite forced conversion to Christianity, represent resistance through hidden preservation of cultural identity. The discovery of a sealed room during 2015 electrical work provided the most intriguing mystery. Behind a false wall in the cellar, workers found a space containing Victorian photographs, women's clothing, and letters suggesting a romantic relationship between 2 women. The photographs show the Courtauld daughters with a woman identified only as E. The letters, passionate but careful, speak of feelings that society forbids and love that dare not speak. This evidence of same-sex relationships, conducted in secret within respectable Victorian society, adds another layer to Gatcombe's hidden histories. Environmental archaeology revealed how power shaped even the landscape. Analysis of lake sediments shows massive soil erosion during Georgian construction as formal gardens replaced natural contours. Pollen evidence indicates destruction of ancient woodlands for fashionable open vistas. The picturesque landscape admired today resulted from violent transformation of existing ecosystems, hundreds of trees, felled to create views that appeared natural but required constant maintenance against nature's tendency toward reforestation. These discoveries transform understanding of Gatcombe Park from simple architectural progression to complex social document. Each generation left traces, intentional and accidental, celebrated and shameful, visible and concealed. Princess Anne's decision to reveal rather than hide these discoveries, publishing findings and creating interpretation materials for visitors, represents unusual honesty about how country houses really functioned. The beautiful facades and gracious rooms tell one story. The graffiti, bones, and hidden symbols tell another. Together, they create a complete narrative of power and resistance, wealth and poverty, visibility and erasure that defines the English country house experience. Chapter 9. Legacy and future Gatcombe Park stands at a crossroads that embodies the dilemmas facing all British country houses in the 21st century. Climate change threatens its physical fabric, while social change questions its cultural relevance. Economic pressures demand commercial exploitation, while heritage values require preservation. Princess Anne, now in her 70s, must plan for transition to the next generation. Her son, Peter Phillips, and daughter Zara Tyndall, who will inherit not just property, but responsibility for determining what role a historic house should play in modern Britain. The climate crisis manifests directly at Gatcombe. The estate has experienced 3 once-in-a-century floods in the past decade, each depositing tons of silt across the parkland and threatening the house's foundations. Summer droughts, increasingly severe, have killed specimen trees planted by Edward Shepherd 250 years ago. The cross-country course, designed for specific ground conditions, becomes unusable when unseasonable weather creates dangerous going. Insurance companies, calculating increased risks, have doubled premiums while adding exclusions that transfer more liability to owners. Princess Anne's response combines pragmatism with innovation. Solar panels, discreetly installed on agricultural buildings, generate 40% of the estate's electricity. Ground source heat pumps, expanded from the original installation, now heat the entire complex. Rainwater harvesting systems, collecting from vast roof areas, supply irrigation during droughts. Carbon sequestration through rewilding of marginal farmland offsets event emissions. These adaptations cost over $2 million since 2010, but position Gatcombe as a model for sustainable heritage management. The social relevance question proves more complex. Why should society preserve monuments to privilege when homelessness persists and inequality widens? Gatcombe's answer lies in transformation from exclusive private space to inclusive public resource. Beyond event weekends, the estate hosts educational programs for state school children who would never otherwise experience countryside. The princess personally funds scholarships bringing urban youth to equestrian training. The house opens monthly for tours, with profits supporting local charities. This democratization of access challenges traditional country house exclusivity while generating community support for preservation. Economic sustainability requires constant innovation. Traditional revenue sources, agricultural rents, event income, television rights, face pressure from multiple directions. Farming subsidies, redirected toward environmental outcomes, reduce agricultural profitability. Competition from purpose-built venues challenges Gatcombe's event monopoly. Streaming services fragment television audiences, reducing broadcast rights values. Princess Anne explores new income streams, wedding venues, carefully managed to preserve privacy, corporate team building using equestrian activities, and luxury camping during events. Each innovation requires balancing commercial necessity against heritage preservation. The next generation brings different perspectives. Peter Phillips, working in sports management, sees potential for year-round sporting events beyond equestrianism. Zara Tyndall, an Olympic equestrian herself, envisions expanding training facilities to create a national center of excellence. Neither seeks to live at Gatcombe full-time, raising questions about maintaining a house without resident owners. Their plans include converting sections into luxury holiday rentals, creating revenue while maintaining family access, a model pioneered by aristocratic families facing similar transitions. Legal structures require careful consideration. Gatcombe remains Princess Anne's personal property, not Crown estate, making inheritance subject to standard taxation. Inheritance tax at 40% could force sale unless carefully planned. Options include transferring ownership to charitable trusts, ensuring preservation while providing tax relief, or creating commercial structures that separate house from business operations. Each approach carries implications for family control versus public benefit that require delicate balance. The heritage industry itself faces transformation. Young visitors, raised on digital experiences, expect interactive engagement rather than passive observation. Gatcombe experiments with augmented reality tours where smartphones reveal hidden histories at specific locations. Virtual reality experiences allow riding the cross-country course without horses. Social media influences shape visitor expectations, demanding Instagram-worthy moments that sometimes conflict with conservation needs. Balancing authentic preservation with contemporary engagement challenges all heritage sites. International examples provide models and warnings. France's chateau system, supported by state funding, preserves magnificently but costs taxpayers billions. America's private preservation, dependent on wealthy donors, maintains some houses while others decay. Ireland's country house hotels generate income but lose domestic character. Each approach offers lessons for Gatcombe's evolution, suggesting hybrid models combining multiple strategies rather than single solutions. The philosophical questions run deeper than practical management. What values do country houses represent worth preserving? Gatcombe embodies multiple narratives: architectural achievement and labor exploitation, landscape beauty and environmental destruction, cultural refinement and social exclusion. Princess Anne argues for honest acknowledgement of all aspects rather than selective commemoration. The house becomes a teaching tool for understanding historical complexity rather than celebrating simplified heritage. Future technologies offer possibilities barely imaginable. Three-dimensional scanning creates perfect digital records, enabling virtual reconstruction if physical fabric fails. Biotechnology might resurrect extinct tree species for historically accurate replanting. Artificial intelligence could manage visitor flows and environmental systems with unprecedented efficiency. Yet each innovation risks diminishing authentic experience, creating simulacra rather than preserving reality. The princess's own philosophy, developed through decades of hands-on management, emphasizes stewardship over ownership. "We're temporary custodians," she states, holding something briefly between past and future. This perspective drives decisions prioritizing long-term sustainability over short-term profit, community benefit over family privilege, honest history over comfortable mythology. Gatcombe's future likely combines multiple models: part family home, part public venue, part educational resource, part commercial enterprise. This hybrid approach, messy and sometimes contradictory, reflects modern Britain's own complexity. The house that merchant wealth built, economic theory animated, and royal pragmatism transformed continues evolving, each generation adding new chapters while preserving earlier narratives. The larger lesson extends beyond Gatcombe to all heritage sites. Preservation requires more than maintaining physical fabric. It demands continuous reinterpretation, finding contemporary relevance for historical structures. Success means buildings remain lived spaces rather than frozen museums, generating income while preserving character, serving communities while maintaining distinctiveness. Gatcombe Park, neither the grandest nor most famous country house, provides a model for this evolution. Imperfect, ongoing, but ultimately sustainable. Chapter 10. Conclusion: The Living House. As morning mist rises over Gatcombe Park today, much as it did that September morning in 1976, when Princess Anne first arrived, the estate stands as testimony to adaptation rather than preservation, evolution rather than revolution. This Georgian merchant's mansion that became an economist's laboratory survived Victorian decline and, transformed into a royal sporting venue, embodies the only true constant in country house history: change itself. The stones that Edward Shepherd laid in 1771 remain, but everything else, purpose, meaning, ownership, use, has transformed repeatedly. Where Shepherd saw social advancement, Ricardo found economic experiment. Where Victorians maintained suffocating propriety, Princess Anne created commercial enterprise. Each generation projected its own values onto unchanging architecture, proving that buildings outlive the intentions of their builders. The untold stories we've uncovered, the enslaved laborers whose suffering funded construction, the servants whose endless toil maintained illusions of ease, the hidden relationships that defied social conventions, remind us that official histories tell partial truths. Every country house contains multiple narratives, layered like archaeological strata, waiting for excavation. Gatcombe's willingness to acknowledge uncomfortable truths rather than perpetuate comfortable myths provides a model for honest heritage interpretation. What Gatcombe Park ultimately represents transcends its individual story. In successfully balancing preservation with profit, heritage with commerce, private ownership with public benefit, it demonstrates that historic houses need not become museums, hotels, or ruins. They can remain homes while serving communities, generate income while preserving character, honor history while embracing future. The challenges ahead, climate change, social relevance, economic sustainability, threaten all heritage sites. Yet Gatcombe's journey from merchant's mansion to royal enterprise proves that adaptation ensures survival better than rigid preservation. The house that commerce built and commerce maintains stands ready for whatever transformations the future demands. For those who visit during events, seeing only smooth lawns and elegant facades, remember the hidden machinery that maintains such appearances. Not the forgotten servants of the past, but the modern professionals whose expertise keeps history alive. For those who never visit, understand that these houses, problematic as their histories may be, preserve important lessons about power, privilege, and the possibility of change. Princess Anne's legacy at Gatcombe extends beyond successful event management or profitable farming. She demonstrated that heritage sites can earn their keep without betraying their character, that royal privilege can create public benefit, that understanding the past honestly enables better futures. The estate she'll leave to her children differs radically from what she inherited, yet remains fundamentally the same: a Georgian house in a Gloucestershire valley, adapting to survive. As you consider Gatcombe's story, ask what hidden histories exist in your own community's historic buildings. What stories remain untold? What voices were silenced? What lessons might they teach about creating a more equitable future while preserving the physical remnants of an inequitable past? The morning mist clears, revealing Gatcombe Park prepared for another day. Neither museum nor monument, but a living building writing new chapters in an ongoing story.